Hi, my name is Jenna Bosiger, and you're watching Cryptic Cryptids. On this episode, I'm finally going to talk about the cynocephalus, or the cynocephaly. Cynocephalus is referring to an individual who has the characteristic of having a dog head. And cynocephaly refers to not the species, but the race of dog-headed men. Anubis was obviously a dog-headed man. The dog-headed men were referred to 3,000 years ago in biblical times, and Saint Christopher was also said to have been one of these dog-headed men. He was a Canaanite. To talk to you about the dog-headed man, the tribe of dog-headed men, the cynocephaly, and talk to you about where they came from and people's reports of them from back in the day. And there's this website that has some really great quotes from the classics. A lot of them were Greek historians who were documenting. They traveled a lot and they documented the things that they saw. And so they were ancient travelers. Let's see what they had to say about the dog-headed men. So it comes from this Greek word, and the pronunciation we know of is the cynocephaly, a tribe of dog-headed men native to Africa and India. So it's interesting already that they say dog-headed men and they don't say another species. Down here they say a human tribe. So that's telling me that we already know they also had some dealings with them. They did some trading with them, and all of this came to an end. But let's look at some of the quotes that they have. These are classic literature quotes. And these names here, I'm not sure if I can pronounce them right, but Hesiod, he was a Greek historian from the 8th or 7th BC century. And he's talking about pursuing the Harpies to the lands of Massagetsi, where they saw half dogmen and other underground folk. There have also been accounts from Libya, which is northern Africa, and also Egypt, also northern Africa. No one would accuse Hesiod of ignorance, though he speaks of the half-dog people and the great-headed people and the small people. Another quote. This is from Herodotus. These are all from Greek historians from the BC century. For the East, so this is also putting them at the same time as Jesus, because they were some encounters with Jesus. There was Saint Christopher, whose life was completely documented, life, death to the date, in the Book of Saints, because he was a dog-headed man and he was a saint, and he was from the land of Canaan. It also says that in the eastern region of Libya, where the nomads inhabit, there's low-lying and sandy as far as the Triton River, and west of this land where the farmers live, it is exceedingly mountainous and woody and full of wild beasts. Huge snakes and lions, elephants, bears, apes, the horned asses, and the cynocephaly, dog-headed men. And the headless men that have their eyes on their chest, as the Libyans say, and the wild men and women, besides many other creatures not fabulous. Many frowned upon these creatures because they were so different. They also had a lot of different lifestyles that we didn't approve of. They ate their meat raw. Some of them walked around naked, and we looked down upon that. They also were fearful looking. It says they On these Indian mountains where live men with the head of a dog, whose clothing is the skin of wild beasts. They speak no language, but bark like dogs, and in this manner make themselves understood by each other. So in other words, they do have a language. We just don't understand it. Their teeth are larger than those of dogs. Their nails are like those of animals, but longer and rounder. They inhabit the mountains as far as the Indus River, and their complexion is swarthy. They are extremely just, like the rest of the Indians with whom they associate. They understand the Indian language, but are unable to converse, only barking or making signals with their hands and fingers as a way to reply, like that of the deaf or dumb. They are also called by the Indians CYNOCEPHALI, the dog-headed. They live on raw meat and in number in about 120,000. They do a lot of hunting. They roast animal meat in the sun. They have a lot of sheep and goats and asses, and they produce amber. I think that's not the sappy stuff that insects are in, but what they use for incense. They dry it in basket with dried grapes. They make rafts with fruit and purple flowers. I mean, this is very detailed stuff. I don't think that somebody made this up. And plus, they were sending things to the king and vice versa, the king of India. So what's interesting, too, is another place. Okay, it says here also. They are very skillful hunters. They use arrows and bows and hurl spears. They can't be defeated in war since they inhabit lofty and inaccessible mountains. They don't live in houses, they live in caves. And then the women bathe once a month, and the men don't bathe at all. Some wear clothes. They sleep on leaves or grass. They have tails on their hips, more longer and hairy, and they live longer than humans. They stand upright, and yet they have no speech. They howl, yet they understand the Indian language. This is somebody else now saying basically the exact same thing as the person before them. When in the description, they're like identical descriptions. And, you know, we didn't have video cameras back then, so this is all we had is word of mouth. But several different words of mouth, all saying the same thing, coming from different sources that haven't talked to each other. There seems to be two different types of dog-headed men, and one of them have black skin and pointed ears and are more wolf-like. The others don't have pointed ears and they're more dog-like, being compared to a mastiff dog sometimes. Oh, they are very swift of foot and know the regions that are inaccessible. That is why they appear to be so hard to capture. So in other words, we were trying to capture them, make them into slaves, no doubt. Ridiculous. But anyways, they weren't able to do it. Here they're talking, this is somebody else now talking about what they eat. And how they come from Ethiopia as well. And when I was looking at the Ethiopian wolf, that's the closest face structure to Anubis that I could find. Now, that's not the only fascinating thing that I wanted to read out loud. The reason I have to read this part out loud is because I feel like you wouldn't even believe me if I was just saying it myself. Oh, well, let's talk a little bit about Saint Christopher, initially called Reprobus, which is in Latin means rejected, by the way. He had a fearsome face, and he took Jesus across a big, huge river because he was so tall and strong. And I guess the interaction during this was that when he took him across the river, he was so heavy compared to everybody else, and he could barely he used all of his might to get this little baby boy across this river. And then when he got to the other side, he's like, why were you so heavy? And he's like, because you had the weight of the world on your shoulders. Okay, let's check this out. This website is stolenhistory.org. Talking about Saint Christopher being a cynocephalus. Oh, he was beheaded. They're talking about Saint Christopher. He was a Canaanite. He was over 7 feet tall. And there are a lot of biblical paintings and things of him. This other thing that's interesting that it says is Goliath was a Philistine, but he was neighbor to Israel and therefore the land of Canaan, previously inhabited by giants. Okay, here's a comment. My understanding is different. I think these creatures were intelligent, but were not created by God. Thus, their flesh was corrupted. He goes on to explain, he goes on to quote the Old Testament. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them. On this way they came. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill them, both man, woman, child, and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. But in the cities of these people, the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance. You shall save alive nothing that breathes, but you shall devote them to complete destruction. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded. Samaria shall bear her guilt because she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword. Their little ones shall be dashed into pieces, and their pregnant women shall be ripped open. And we captured all the cities at that time and devoted to destruction every city, man, woman, child. We left no survivors. Then devoted all in the city to destruction, both men, women, young, old, sheep, oxen, with the edge of the sword. What does the Bible say about genocide? God makes it clear to the Israelites that not because of your righteousness or your integrity are you going to take possession of their land, but on account of the wickedness of these nations. They don't look wicked to me. He says, I think the genocide we see in the Bible is directly related to corrupt genes. Interesting. And the flood, also was God's way of destroying these creatures. But that's brutal. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I wanted to quote that because I didn't feel I could do it justice paraphrasing that. I think it's pretty clear that that land they were living in is very much desired land. They were booted out of there. Hopefully they went underground. That's not the only place they lived, but these creatures were not going to be tolerated by anyone. Not by the Christians, not by the anti-Christians, not by anybody. So that's why they're in hiding now, today. So tell me what you think about this most interesting topic and this tribe of humans with dog heads. I think it could be the reason for the werewolf myths and legends And I think they're always described as being 7 feet tall. It's just, they're described the exact same way. Oh, and let's talk about the Andaman Islands. What a fascinating place. It also says, indigenous Andaman Islanders inhabit the more remote islands, many of which are off limits to visitors. I watched a documentary about a man who snuck onto one of these islands to make contact with the natives, and he was killed. I think the last message he got out to people was, "I don't want to die." It's a really good documentary, though. You should see it. The CYNOCEPHALI with an S. Okay, look at these places, though. This is just, to me, just stimulates my imagination to no end. When you zoom in on this island and you see this, look at that. Look at it. What's in there? What's in there? Ooh, just goes on. Oh, it's fascinating. And it's huge, off limits, impenetrable, inaccessible. And that's where they come from. Well, thank you for watching this episode of Cryptic Cryptids about the CYNOCEPHALI, the race of dog-headed men, which I do believe existed. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and hit the bell, and we'll see you next time. Bye.